He told me this 3 months after it happened, sitting in a diner outside Portland on a Tuesday afternoon. He ordered black coffee and didn't touch it for the entire conversation. "I want you to understand what I believed," he said. "Not what I said I believed, what I actually functionally believed in my body every day I went to work." He is a medical examiner, 31 years, the same county, the same building, the same stainless steel tables. He would tell you, he has told me, that there is no clinical definition of his job that doesn't end at the body. A body is what arrives. A body is what he examines. The person who used to live there, he had decided a long time ago, is simply not his department. That's not cynicism. That's how you do 31 years of that work without losing your mind. He's asked me not to use his name, so I'll call him what he told me to call him, David. In January of last year, David had a heart attack in his office. He described it as, and I want to get his exact words right, like someone reached into my chest and made a fist. He was 58 years old, in reasonable health, no prior cardiac history. The LAD was blocked. His secretary, Linda, found him on the floor next to his desk and called 911. The responding paramedics established that he had gone into ventricular fibrillation. His heart was quivering, not pumping, electrically chaotic. By the time they got him on the AED and delivered the first shock, he had been in VFib for approximately 5.5 minutes. 5.5 minutes is a long time. I've worked with patients who didn't come back from shorter arrests than that. David came back, and that was when the conversation he and I eventually needed to have actually began. Here is what he told me happened during those 5.5 minutes. He remembers the pain stopping. He describes it not as gradual, not as fading, but as a switch. One moment, the fist in his chest. The next, nothing. And then, before he could process the absence of pain, he was looking down at himself. Now, I want to say something here as a nurse. Out-of-body experiences during cardiac arrest get dismissed in two ways. Either they're hallucinations generated by a hypoxic brain in its final functioning moments, or they're memories reconstructed afterward based on what a person already knows about resuscitation procedures. Both explanations sound reasonable. I used both of them for 22 years. Here's what complicates that explanation in David's case. He described details of his own resuscitation that he should not have been able to know. The position of the paramedics around his body, the specific words Linda said on the phone while she waited on hold. "He's gray. His lips are gray. I don't know what to do. Please hurry." He described the paramedic on his left side asking his partner for a second strip, meaning a second rhythm reading from the monitor, before they shocked him again. These are verifiable details. Linda confirmed what she said, word for word. The lead paramedic confirmed the request for a second strip. Both of them spoke with David independently, without each other present. I'll let you sit with that for a moment. But that wasn't even what David needed to tell me about. He said the out-of-body portion lasted, and he knows how this sounds, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. He was watching, but he was also not particularly interested, because he was being pulled somewhere else, not physically. He doesn't have a better word than pulled, the way water pulls toward a drain, except without the sense of danger. And then he was standing, and he says standing may be entirely the wrong concept, in a space he described as like the moment after the lights come up in a theater. But the theater is everywhere. Clarity. That was the word he kept returning to. Extraordinary clarity. No pain, no anxiety, no confusion about where he was or what was happening. A sense, his exact phrase, of being completely awake for the first time in his adult life. And then, the faces. I want to be careful here, because what David described to me next is not something I can verify the way the resuscitation details can be verified. What I can tell you is that he described it the same way both times we spoke, without hesitation. In the same register he would use to describe examining a case file. He recognized them. Not all of them. There were too many, but some. He said it was like looking across a crowded room and locking eyes with someone you know from somewhere you can't quite place, and then placing them, and then the shock of that recognition arriving in your chest. He said, I knew exactly what they were. I knew they were people I had worked with, people who had been on my table. He stopped, and they weren't. They weren't what I had seen on my table. They were what had been living inside the body on my table. You understand the difference? The body is the container. And I had spent 31 years thinking the container was the entire thing. He stared at his coffee. Every person I ever autopsied, the ones from accidents, the ones from illness, the ones from violence, I thought I knew what they were. I thought I understood their situation completely. What I was looking at, it turned out, was a coat left on a chair. They had already walked out the door. They were fine. They had been fine. I was the one in the room who didn't understand what was going on. There was one specific person. I'm not going to give you her name. David asked me not to, but I will tell you what happened. She was a case from approximately 2 years before his cardiac arrest. A car accident on a rural highway in winter. She was 34 years old. He had handled her case, which means he knew her face, her case number, the way her file read. He had not known her as a living person. He knew only what arrived on his table. In that space, she was there. And she looked at him. He says she didn't communicate in any way he can describe as words, but he understood her completely. She wanted him to convey something to her daughter. He came back from that cardiac arrest carrying her daughter's name in his head. Not a name he had ever seen, because nothing in the case file he had worked 2 years earlier listed her children by name. Her daughter's name, a nickname specifically, was not in any document David had ever reviewed. He tracked down the family through the case number. He found the daughter. He told her what her mother had given him to say. I asked him what the daughter's reaction was. He picked up his coffee cup, held it without drinking. She said her mother used to call her that, the nickname. Only her mother called her that. Nobody else in the family even knew she had a nickname. He set the cup down without drinking. That's not something I can explain, he said, and I've spent 31 years explaining things for a living. I need to tell you what the research actually says about this, because David didn't know any of it at the time, and the truth is that most of medicine doesn't know it either, or pretends not to. In 2001, a cardiologist named Pim van Lommel published a prospective study in the Lancet. That's not some fringe publication. The Lancet has been one of the most respected medical journals in the world for over a century. Van Lommel and his team followed 344 consecutive cardiac arrest survivors across 10 Dutch hospitals. Prospective methodology, meaning they began tracking patients before the cardiac arrests happened, not after. They weren't cherry-picking stories that confirmed a theory. They were watching everyone. 18% of those patients reported a near-death experience. 12% reported what the researchers called a core experience, the full sequence: separation, light, encounter, return. 1 in 8 survivors of cardiac arrest. Van Lommel's team specifically documented what they called veridical perception. Patients who, during clinical death, with no measurable blood flow to the brain, described accurate details of what was happening around their bodies. Details confirmed afterward by the medical teams present. Details that could not have been observed from the position the patients were lying in. He published this in the Lancet in 2001. And the standard explanation that these are hallucinations from a dying brain hits a very specific wall. During cardiac arrest, the brain is not generating the electrochemical activity required to produce a hallucination. The EEG goes flat. The mechanism we invoke to explain these experiences away is, at the precise moment these experiences occur, absent. Van Lommel was not the first. In 1975, a psychiatrist named Raymond Moody published Life After Life, the first systematic collection of near-death experience accounts over 150 cases, showing a consistent pattern that repeated across patients who had never met each other, who had never read each other's accounts, who came from completely different backgrounds and belief systems. 50 years ago. This has been in the scientific literature for 50 years. David hadn't read any of it. He knew what he knew from 31 years of working with the dead. And what he knew on that Tuesday afternoon in January, sitting in a diner outside Portland, was that everything he had functionally believed was wrong. After my own experience, the surgery in 2019 that went wrong, the 3 minutes and 14 seconds in that operating room that I've mentioned before, I spent months trying to go back to the families. The families from my ICU years, the ones who sat in the waiting room while we worked on their person, the ones who came down the hall afterward with that specific face, the face that knows already but hasn't been told yet. There is one family I think about a great deal. Their son came in after a motorcycle accident. He was 26 years old. We worked on him for a long time. We did everything correctly. It didn't matter. When I walked into that family room, his mother was sitting in the chair closest to the door, like she had been ready to stand up and follow someone somewhere for hours. She let me say what I came in to say, and when I finished, she asked me quietly, not accusing, not desperate, just needing to know, is he still? Is he somewhere? Is he okay? I gave her the clinical answer. I told her he was at peace. I told her he wasn't in pain. What I meant underneath those words was nothing. I meant that the process had ended and the machinery had stopped and there was no more him to be anywhere at all. I didn't know what David knows now. I didn't know what Van Lommel's study participants knew. I didn't know what the 44 million Americans who report having had some form of this experience know. I think about that mother more than I can say. I hope someone, somewhere, has since told her what I couldn't. David told me at the end of our conversation that he still goes to work. Same building, same county, same stainless steel tables. He said it's different now, not in any way that affects the quality or rigor of his work. He still writes the same reports. He still brings the same precision, but different. I walk in there in the morning, he said, and I look at whoever is on my table, and I know something I didn't know before. That person has moved on. What I'm looking at is the suit they left hanging on the chair. And it matters. It matters enormously. We owe the dead our precision and our care and our full attention. But I'm not confused anymore about what the body is or what it isn't. He picked up his coffee cup for the last time. 31 years, he said, and it took dying to figure out what my job actually is. If you've lost someone, and you're sitting with the question of whether they're okay somewhere, I'm not able to offer you a certainty. Nobody honest can do that. But I can offer you a man who spent 31 years on the side of the dead, who crossed over to their side and came back unable to tell you they're just gone. And I can offer you 344 cardiac arrest survivors in 10 Dutch hospitals, followed prospectively, 1 in 6 describing the same basic shape of experience. And I can offer you my own 22 years of dismissing all of this, and what I saw in that operating room that made me stop. Whatever the body is, I no longer believe it's the whole story. And I think somewhere, the 26-year-old on the motorcycle knows that his mother asked. That, I have come to believe, is worth something. Maybe everything.